TV app on the respective stores, iOS and Android. ZINGOTV is also available on Roku, Roku Sticks, Amazon Fire Sticks, Google Chromecast, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. It's free. Download it today. How's everybody doing out there? I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys can hear me. I'm not even totally sure if that's going to happen right about now. But this is Scott Schertzen, and as always, this is the Sports Den. Appreciate you guys being here. Alongside me, as always, is my far better co-host, Mr. Obi Schottenfeld. How are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you today?
Great, thank you. And also my even better guest host in this case, Mr. David Hashhagen.
Oh, please, just stop buttering me up here.
Oh, no, I plan to the entire show. Mr. Rob Stats is going to be on a little bit later. He's covering something for one of the college events. He'll be on probably in a little bit after that. And Jared is once again out in the field because one of the problems that happens when you're covering sports in other locations is they require mandatory quarantines. So every time he's covering a sport for the network that he's affiliated with, he has to quarantine in a hotel and work for them the entire time for literally 10 days straight. So he is under quarantine arrest every single week in a different part of the country, which is why that poor man has not been on the show. We continue to talk, and there we go. So we got a few things we're going to cover today. The reason David is on this show is because he is, in fact, our soccer aficionado. We haven't done a lot of MLS on this show, much like we didn't do a lot of Olympics last week, which Kristen was on. So we got him talking about that a little bit. I do want to talk about a little bit about Pittsburgh and Buffalo, fear Buffalo for what they have become. Also, possibly fear Washington. You know, this is a team that is now in first place in the NFC least. Alex Smith took an injury, but he should be okay and ready to go. They're talking. I definitely want to talk LSU. What has been known as the shoe game. I have audio from that a little bit, and maybe a little MLB in there as well. So let me start off. Obi, how you doing, sir?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here. Last week I couldn't get the football team's name right. I'm going to correct that this week.
That's okay. We have a new sports team that we're going to have to start changing names to, and I think the year 2022 though.
Yes.
But yeah. So yeah, the Washington team. The Washington Sentinels is fine if you want to use the Keanu Reeves movie from 2000 of Replacements. I'm cool with that. That's my preference for a team name. But I think a lot of people have done it. I've seen it on national TV. I think Kevin Burkhardt did it by accident once and referred to the Washington team by their old name. So no worries there. David, what's going on with you, man?
Oh, just struggling through this pandemic life of 2020, but overall, holding my own. Started with a brand new USL League 2 expansion right here in the state of New Jersey, which is the for people who don't know what it is, especially our Canadian audience, there's not many teams up there. You're talking the premier North American pre-professional league. 85% of draft picks every year in MLS are coming out of this league, so a lot of exciting stuff, a lot of great college prospects, guys who are trying to make the pros. So I can't complain being on them with them, and thankful to join Moore's Elite.
That's awesome. I remember actually when you got that gig, because I think we were both covering the XFL, which is sort of equivalent in a lot of ways. I think, one football to another football, depending on how you look at it. So yeah, that's huge kudos. So I definitely want to talk a little bit about that. But you know what? Let's start this off because of the fact this show does operate out of Toronto, and a lot of the people, including Joe, are big fans of Buffalo. Fear the Bills. This is a team that I am really excited by. This is a team that has struggled mightily in a lot of years, and it's been overdue for a frankly dominant team. And you know what? That was a pretty impressive win that they had over, granted, maybe a little bit of a fatigued Pittsburgh team, but it's still a win anyway. And now they're a game behind Pittsburgh.
Yeah, this Buffalo team, I mean, first of all, it comes down to Josh Allen. They have found a quarterback that they can rely on consistently to get the job done, and it's because they've let him play the way he's supposed to. Josh Allen's not a pocket passer. He's not supposed to be sitting back there taking shots. He's supposed to be running. They're allowing him to do that. This Buffalo team does not have a good running back for the first time in 10 years, but they're winning football games. And I mean, you talk about the Steelers. I mean, tell me somebody who can play the number of games they've played in 2 weeks and not be fatigued.
Sure.
It's a little bit ridiculous, to be honest, but this is the world we live in the fluid schedule department.
That's a nice way of putting it, fluid schedule. Yeah. Obi?
Yeah, the Bills, they should scare you as much as the Colts or the Steelers if you're Kansas City. But if you're Kansas City, does anyone really scare you? That's the juxt of the question. And Josh Allen, I will say this, I wouldn't want to spot him 24 points. The other two teams I mentioned, Pittsburgh and Indy, I'd spot them 24 points and see if I could come back against them if I'm Kansas City. But I don't think the Buffalo Bills, if they're rolling scoring points, are going to slow down. So I think they're the one team that can go try to have a shootout with Kansas City in the AFC. So fear them? No, but definitely respect them.
But be excited for what that future has to hold for that team.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right now, they're game behind Pittsburgh for second place overall. They have, in my opinion, a slightly easier schedule. Coming up the last 3 weeks, they're in Denver, they're in New England, and then at home against Miami. Whereas on the other hand, Pittsburgh has to basically go up against the Bengals on the road, fine, but then at home against against Indianapolis, and then on the road against Cleveland. That's a little bit of a tougher schedule. It is entirely possible that if Pittsburgh goes 1-2, that they actually may drop and Buffalo will end up the number 2 seed. I think that's going to be a really exciting thing for that team. Again, like you said, it's all going to come down to who is going to probably be going up against the Chiefs in this case, because everything right now is going to be going through Kansas City. It is going through everything with Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey, and everybody else there. There is no reason in my mind that I don't think that team cannot repeat. I think it's a safe bet. I think it's probably a boring bet, to be brutally honest with you. But I think right now everything is going to be going through that team. But if any team I think right now could take them down in the AFC, I'm going to probably go with Buffalo. I like it.
Yeah, I think in terms of Kansas City, I think they almost scare me more this time around because they're not blowing everybody out. They're winning the close game when they have to. This is the thing. When you put up 50, 60 points in a game, no one's going to scare you then at that point. It's when you get into a tough fight and, oh, by the way, we won that one too. That makes it interesting. But again, Buffalo's got a defense that can be feared.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one thing about Buffalo that does scare you. Josh Allen's a good quarterback, but he's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Lamar Jackson. But that defense will intimidate the hell out of you all the way through. That's what makes Buffalo intriguing to me. I think Pittsburgh, I think they just got, run into the ground. They don't have a running game really this year. It's too much on Ben Roethlisberger at his age. But Kansas City, no. I think in terms of how dangerous they are, I think you're right. I think they're almost more dangerous this year than they were last time around.
Yeah, and you rule it's tougher to actually repeat, after being champions. I'm sorry, Obi, go ahead.
I was going to say the good teams win the bad games. That's when you know you're a really good team. And I mean, to me, Pittsburgh, when Bud Dupree, which his name does not match what you expect him to look like at all. Expect him to look something like me, goofy looking name, Bud Dupree. But when he went down, I think a lot of their hopes went down, not just over this stretch. And I do see Buffalo catching them because Cleveland's going to have something to play for where second versus the third seed isn't going to matter. Ravens are going to have something to play with. Again, second versus third seed may not matter, especially when you're really worried about your receivers learning to catch the ball. So I think Buffalo is a good shot at that second seed, but with Bud Dupree and the rest of the defensive injuries they've had in the linebacking core, it's just they don't have that second element. They have great wide receivers and a quarterback who sometimes is looking that he still has it in him, but no running game and that defense going away hurts a lot.
But it's going to be fun to see. I do think Pittsburgh will turn it around. I think they'll probably end up 13-3 this year would be my guess. I think it's a safe bet there. The game against Cleveland will be interesting. Cleveland, of course, going up against the Giants, who now absolutely have something to play for after that performance. Do you want to call it that the other day? I mean, the defense, fine. The defense held their own pretty well, but that offense was just terrible. It's the NFC least. I get it. It's what it is. But as a suffering Giants fan, I got to admit, I'm happy. I'm excited. I've had a lot of conversations with people who keep talking about how they should just throw it, go for the draft next year. Fine. I get that. But this is a team that hasn't sniffed sniffed one game in the postseason since the Super Bowl in 2012. So I kind of want to see how far they can go, which in this case would be, an NFC East, NFC East win. But I can't help it. I want to see them do well. I think they could actually beat Cleveland this weekend, which will obviously throw a huge monkey wrench into the entire NFC know it that way. But I think Washington, is it their division now to lose?
I love their defensive line, which is what I was saying last week. And Chase Young just went out and showed again how amazing he is. Allen's playing really well. But you're now throwing Haskins back in there. So the Washington football team is going to have to win games 17-14 for 3 weeks in a row or something. So it's going to be ugly whichever team comes out of the East. But I'd also say if Allen is healthy, they have a healthy quarterback. If either team has a healthy quarterback, Washington or Giants, I wouldn't count them out for an upset in the early round against Green Bay, because Green Bay is throwing some clunkers. Or if it's Tampa Bay who gets that number 2 seed. Both of them have just had moments where they have had clunkers, especially Brady. He has days where it's like, oh, yeah, he's over 40. And if that happens in the playoffs, you get a shocking upset from the NFC East team.
Well, I think that's part of the problem that's happening in Tampa right now is that the years have caught up with Tom Brady. The weeks have been caught up with Tom Brady. So while he is honestly, for a 43-year-old guy, he's put up very, very good numbers, but that team rides everything on him. And even in New England, you see what's happened with the very difference in New England. Now, I thought personally the Patriots are going to be a lot better team this year. I figured if you're going to replace Tom Brady with Cam Newton, that's about as good a grab as you can get because Cam Newton had something to play for. He had a contract to play for. He had to show he still had it in the tank. And then you see what's happened to that entire team and how it's more or less imploded. It's such a weird entity to see a Belichick team miss the playoffs. I mean, we haven't seen that at all. I mean, the only year that came moderately close was the year, I think, 2008 when Tom Brady went down, but they brought in Matt Castle and they won at 11-5. By New England standards, it wasn't quite as good, but it was still an 11-win season anyway. I mean, right now that team is going to struggle to make 500, and it's what can you say? But only 2020.
I mean, as a struggling Jets fan, former Jets fan, because quite frankly, if you're a team that doesn't even care about winning, I'm not going to be a fan of you. So that's why I say former. It brings me a little bit of joy. It brings me a little bit of joy to see New England struggling just once. Just a little bit. But no, I think I've said it for a long time. Tom Brady is the greatest system quarterback ever to play. Because if he's any other system than Bill Belichick's, he's not that good. Yeah. I'm telling you this right now. He doesn't throw the ball downfield very often. When he does, it's usually not accurate. He's great at throwing 10-yard routes to Gronkowski and let him run, but unless he has a system around him, there's nothing. But going back to the NFC least, though, who would have thought the team that would be out of contention is the Dallas Cowboys? In this whole division, when the season began, you have a Carson Wentz-led Eagles team, a Washington team that's going through a complete facelift from everything from the name to the quarterback to the head coach, to the Giants, who have brought in a special teams coordinator as their head coach. And yet Dallas is the one on the wayside. I think it's just ridiculous. Ezekiel Elliott has had a terrible year. He cannot hold on to the football. You see what happens when you lose Dak Prescott on that offense. And quite frankly, Mike McCarthy is not the right guy for this job. He's just not. When he was the head of the Green Bay Packers, those were the worst years the Packers had with Aaron Rodgers, is when Mike McCarthy was in charge. So why would you expect anything different?
But the same thing you could also hold true with Joe Judge. Any from the Bill Belichick pedigree has been questionable.
Yeah.
But you look at actually all things considered, what the Giants have been able to do with Joe Judge, it hasn't been bad, by Giants and first-year coach standards. I mean, the team has still gone 5-3 in their last 8, which props to that after losing the first 5. But yeah, I mean, we came into the season, we thought right off the bat it was going to be a complete flip-flop. It was going to be Philadelphia and Dallas going at it the whole way through. I think it was around week 4 we had the show. We were talking about the fact that the Eagles. Did I say the Eagles in the beginning earlier when I started this diatribe? I forget.
I think so, probably.
Let's. I don't know. I thought for some reason, you ever have one of those things where you say something and in the back of your mind you realize you said it wrong, and then you try and catch it. Anyway.
Every day.
By the way, welcome to how my brain works. So anyway, as I was saying, back around week 4, we had talked about the show, the idea that the Eagles and Dallas were going to be the 2 teams that were going to fight this out. And then Washington and the Giants were going to be fighting for the draft picks. it's been a complete flip-flop on this. It has been a complete turnaround. You see what's happened with Carson Wentz. After going, I think 33-9, I think was the touchdown interception ratio last year, to what it is now, where he doesn't have a job. Jalen Hurts is now the quarterback. To seeing what happened with Dallas, where you have Andy Dalton, who is a serviceable backup, and you see all the problems that are happening in Dallas right now. This is now no longer America's team. I don't think. I think honestly, Kansas City is probably America's team. Don't tell Jerry Jones that, but and if he wants to come on and argue with me, I'm more than happy to listen to him and have him chew me out. I'm cool with that, but it's such a roller. It's such a weird reversal. The Giants started out 0-5, and they're competing right now 5-8, fine. But Washington right now, I think they've got a really legitimate shot. And maybe that's what's required for the NFC East. Change your name to nothing, and you win a division.
In a division that's full of nothing, that's the right name to have.
Smart. True.
See, I go with the I call it the Tampa Bay theory. You change your name from something horrible and or offensive, and you get successful. Tampa Bay dropped the devil from Devil Rays. They went to the World Series. Washington drops the Redskins. They are now the football team, and well, look what's happening.
I call them football team. I only do that when I'm making fun of the team. Fine. Just like you want to call it New York, Cleveland, Cincinnati, I'm fine with that. But I will not refer to them as football team. If you look at like NFL.com, whoever they're playing, it's like football team versus, Seahawks. It makes no logical sense. Just change it to Washington versus, I'm cool. Listen, I am cool with the fact that they dropped the name. I have never, ever had a problem with that. Teams change names, all the time. Cleveland Indians, we're going to talk about that a little bit too. They're changing their name as well. I want to get your ideas on what you want that team name to be. I've got a couple ideas of my own, but it's normal. But I will not call them football team.
How about the Washington Football Nationals or the Washington Football Capitals?
I am down for that. If they want to call themselves the Washington Football Wizards, I'm cool with that too.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to go Washington Bullets again, but
New York's done that for years. It's still the New York Football Giants for no reason whatsoever, considering the New York Baseball Giants left in the 1950s.
Yes, and there was also, nobody remembers this, but there was also the New York Football Yankees and the Boston Yankees.
Yep.
No one remembers those two. But I'll give you props on that. But nobody remembers that team actually existed that way. But even now with the San Francisco Giants, being out there since 1960?
Something like that, yeah.
The New York Football Giants. And personally, I love it. But yes, the Washington team, I'm sorry. I can't get behind that. I can't wait for them to come out with a new name. The Washington Sentinel would be great.
I think it's great that you're going on about how you can't get behind that. And we're going to do a segment on soccer where everyone is the football club. So I think that's...
My favorite rugby team in England is Bath. Bath has no nickname. One of the few teams over there that doesn't. I am cool with that. And yes, I know it's NYCFC, everything, Toronto Football Club. That's cool. I don't care. But you got the one team there. One of these kids is not like the other. If you remember Sesame Street, it's the same kind of thing here. One of these teams is not like the other. So yeah, for me, I can't get behind it. But we talked a little bit about, since we're on name changes, I figure we'll switch this around a bit. Cleveland obviously is dropping the Indians moniker, which is not honestly that big of a change because their logo has been a C for I don't even know how many years at this point. I would love to see them go back to one of the old team names that they had. They used to be referred to as the Broncos. I don't know. I like the Cleveland Broncos.
See, for me, there's one option and one option only, and it's the Cleveland Spiders.
You
have to go back to the Cleveland Spiders. The logo is that people have already put up concepts of in the thousands is phenomenal. But you're also just going back to the heritage of baseball in that city. You have to go Spiders.
The only reason I'm not saying Spiders in this case, because actually that was two different teams. That was a different team, which is why I won't go. The one reason I won't go with Spiders. The other reason, I hate them. I'm fortunate the basement has a ton of land centipedes that just kind of pop around. I'm happy with it because they eat all the spiders. I never have to see them. But I do not want to sit there and just see one out of the corner of my eye. Now that we're even talking about it, I'm looking around the room trying to see if I can find any because I'm that paranoid when it comes to spider. No, Cleveland, do not change your team name to Spiders. Make it something else.
Can we go with the Rockers from the old Cleveland Rocks?
Oh, yeah. Oh, you little. I don't know how much of that I'm allowed to do legally with I think what is it, 8 seconds for the YouTube live stream before you get flagged?
Yeah, something like that. Why don't we just go with the Cleveland Carries? Name him after Drew Carey. Why not?
God, yeah. I mean,
Bronnies. Let's give them their favorite hero. They'll just be the Cleveland Bronnies. Just name right after him.
But yeah, Drew Carey, he should have an input on the name, I think. He is as much Cleveland as Kevin Smith is Jersey. But one thing I should point out, since we're talking Drew Carey, I'm digging the beard he's now got because he looks like Letterman. And B, he has been doing Prices Right since 2007. I don't know if anybody realized that, but he took over for Bob Barker before Obama became president. W was still president when he took over on the head of Price is Right. But
that is surprisingly long. It feels like, honestly, he's been doing it for 2 years, and Bob Barker is still telling me to get my dog spayed and neutered.
Yeah, well, Drew Carey now says get your dog spayed and neutered. But okay, so you're voting Cleveland Spiders. I want Broncos. Obi, what about you?
I really like Rockers. I just think that is when other people think of Cleveland, what they think of is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and of course the song Cleveland Rocks, which again Drew Carey made well known. Okay, I can get behind that.
I got one other suggestion though, and that would be, I mean, if we're going to go what Cleveland's really known for, let's just call them the Cleveland LeBrons.
Yeah.
I mean, it's LeBron James all the time, so we might as well.
Except basically when he leaves the team, and then they, the fans burn their jerseys in disgust.
Not the second time. They were okay the second time. They let it happen. They let it go.
Championship and everything, it all was cool and all was right in the world. But I'm sure there were some devout fans that are like, no, not again. You left us a second time. It's like that jilted spouse. It's like you left me once, fine, I'll let it go. You left me twice, no, I can't forgive you for it. But but I would. Oh yeah, well, LeBron. I mean, since we're talking about that, did you hear about his contract? 2 years, $85 million.
Well, top that, did you hear what Giannis just signed today?
I was going to say, well, you know what Howard Stern signed, but you start first.
5 years, I believe it was $220-something million extension to stay in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can do. Can I have like, I don't know, 1/2 of 1/3 of 1% of that, and just
yeah.
And I'll live in Milwaukee.
But no, that must be nice. Must be nice.
Yeah, that what the old saying when I was a financial advisor, that and food stamps will get you through the weekend. But I remember, Howard Stern signed $120 million a year deal to stay with Sirius. I believe it was a 5-year deal for $600 million.
I know it was 5 years. I didn't remember the price tag though.
Yeah, all you got to be is either really good at sports or controversial, and they give you the money.
But you know what? Here's the weird thing. When I did America's Got Talent 5 years ago, he was the nicest of the four. So you know what? I give him credit on that. You know what? He can make $600 million. I'm all right with that. He was the nice one. The rest of them sucked. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. Tune into my later show, Tales from the Film Set, to learn more about my time on America's Got Talent. Anyway, we are now closing in on almost halfway through the show at this point. Damn, we are flying. So as always, find us on Twitter at BB Sports Den and Facebook at Barnburner Sports Den. In sports, there is, especially in football, there is a rule called unnecessary roughness. It is a rule that usually involves hitting a player too hard, injuring them in some facet or form, or in one particular case with the Florida LSU game, throwing a shoe. Now, this is the audio recording. Throwing the player's shoe 20 yards down, 20 yards down the field, which in this particular case led to their loss. The game was tied at 34, It was something where it would have brought up fourth down, but they got a penalty on this case. And LSU ended up kicking a 57-yard field goal to beat the Gators and drop the Gators to 8th from 6th. I'm trying to decide in my history if there has been a dumber penalty ever. Donovan Sue, I feel like he kicked the guy in the junk once, as an unsportsmanlike, but I'm trying to remember, has there ever been anything as dumb as that?
I mean, it's up there with guys dropping the ball at the 1 yard line for sure. But in terms of a penalty, no. But here's the thing. And what I loved about this, first of all, I hated it and loved it at the same time. First of all, I got my dad and I'm like, you have to watch this. It will make you angry. Because my dad is an old school, no showboating, don't have fun, play sports. But I'm like, you're going to hate this play. But then when you watch the replay of him throwing it, you can see 3 or 4 of his teammates. Oh, it's almost like they're running up in slow motion, like, no. Like, you could tell that they knew what was going to happen, that they knew this one kid has done this before. At some point, he does something stupid, because there's always one guy on every team that does it, and they're like, no, not now. And it was too late. The shoe's gone, the flag's gone, and just glorious.
It was 26 yards, specifically.
I'm not even sure it cost them the game. Like, were they going to win? Were they going to win if it went to overtime? They were playing poorly against a team that wasn't that good. Trask already had 2 interceptions and a fumble. So, yeah, this kid gets the loss on his shoulders. But I don't think they were going to win. I think this game was that was the final straw in the game that Florida was playing poorly in against a team that was not having a good season.
Granted, they did miss the field goal of their own. I think it's a 54, 58-yarder field goal of their own, which props, by the way. Since when did kickers in college get that far? I don't really remember that. Kickers never used to 10 years ago. Now it's almost like a chip shot. But, yeah, they might be arguably one of the dumbest penalties I've ever seen in my life. One of the funniest, like you said, but one of the dumbest of all time because I don't know. I mean,
what goes through your mind? Honestly, what goes through your mind on a play? Like, I have a shoe in my hand. I can drop it. I could give it back to him. No, I'm going to try out for the quarterback position for next year. Yeah.
He thought he was Roger Clemens, and it was a baseball bat.
Yeah. Oh, God, that. Yeah, 2000 World Series.
Yeah.
That might be up there with one of the dumbest moments ever.
But he got away with it, though. I mean,
he did.
And the Yankees won the World Series that year, too, on top of it.
Well, yeah, Piazza kept his cool, and Clemens walked away.
And then I think was 2002 when Clemens batted, when he finally batted in Shea Stadium. Somebody hit a home run off him he lost the game from it. Yeah. But I remember who's the pitcher for that? Was it Sean Estes? The guy who was not there in 2000 was tasked with the responsibility of beating, Roger Clemens, even though he wasn't on the team in 2000 when all this stuff went down. He threw it like 8 feet behind the guy.
That I remember. I remember the attempt, and it was like 2 attempts in a row where he just, and they were like, all right, just stop.
Give it up.
It's like 50 Cent on the first pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is it with the Mets and this sort of thing? But
the Mets might actually have their act together, but that's a different discussion for a different day.
What? We can discuss it now. I'm cool with that. I mean, they got the back pages right now. That doesn't necessarily involve LeMahieu and whether that's going to happen. It's not going to happen. I think it is. The contract, apparently they're apart by, I want to say $25 million, those two. I think the Yankees are offering 4 years, 75. The LeMahieu wants 5 years, 100. I think they're probably going to settle to like 4 years, 80 million with an option for a 5th. I think that's probably the way that they're going to settle this whole thing. But there's no way that the Yankees are going to let LeMahieu walk. I think there'll be riots in the streets. Socially distant rioting, but riots in the streets.
I think for the Mets fans, I think they're just joyful to have competent leadership for once.
Well,
like,
yes,
you got to give
New York area sports teams are just historically bad for just poor ownership / leadership between the Knicks, the Mets, NYCFC. The whole thing is just, all right, we have a terrible owner. You know what would be perfect for? New York.
Yeah.
Send to the top of the list. It's over.
It's either like they can't handle the pressure of it, or their ego is more important than the product on the field. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I'm withholding judgment on this right now. I'm going to say the same thing I sort of said last year, where this is the year I think the Mets have a really good shot to make something happen. I think the COVID year last year allowed them that because they had the DH, they had 60 games. I mean, Robbie Cano put up great numbers on a short season because he didn't have to stress himself out that much. And now that he's been nailed the second time, he's out for the season. The Mets get back 20 million, which will allow them some flexibility in the contract. They got McCann, I think was part of the influence on that. But I think this, once again, is going to very possibly be a year that they could at least make a run and make it interesting. Now, what's interesting also is that there's a lot of heavy talk that they're going to start the season now in May versus April. They're talking about a 140-game schedule, COVID, everything's going on. They don't feel that they can do spring training in the same sort of fashion that they would like to right now. The vaccine is still slowly permeating its way back in. I think the players are probably going to get pushed a little higher to the top of the list, on the grounds of the celebrity influence aspect of it, I think. But if it goes to the 140 games, frankly, it's 40 games more than I was expecting. If you asked me at the end of last year, I was going to say 100. 140 is pretty solid. What do you think?
I think anything over 60 gives you a legitimate understanding of what's going on in the season. So 140 is 40 bonus games to me. We want 162. We're just not going to get it. I think the question becomes how many teams are going to make the playoffs, though, if we're getting 140 games. Are we going to keep where we're at? Are we going to go up? We're going to go down? What that story is? How important is the regular season going to be?
Yeah. David?
I honestly, looking at how badly MLB almost screwed things up last year with negotiations and trying to get a season together, the fact that they've even got anywhere something close at this point is a minor miracle under Rob Manfred's leadership, who I think now is close to becoming the worst commissioner in all of sports. But in terms of the playoffs, I think you got to shrink it back down. If you're going to go more than 100 games, I think you got to go back to the format from 2019 instead of the expanded format. If you're looking at 100 games, okay, you can add the extra wildcard team in, even though those games were excellent at the end of the season. But if you're going 140 games, you don't need the extra teams for me. I think at that point, and especially if you're starting late, you can't have that extra round of games.
I think they're going to probably still have the expanded playoffs anyway, because it just comes down to money. I think it comes down to it's the revenue aspect of it. I would like to see faster playing games, because I think part of the problem with Major League Baseball's declining popularity is that there are so many games, they are slow moving, and frankly, it's a faster paced world. This is a world that's measured in how fast we can respond to things. Baseball, where it's a minute between pitches, I think loses its audience. And that's part of the challenge that exists when you have a game that starts at 8:00 at night in the Eastern time zone on a work night, and it doesn't end until 12:30 at night for a 9-inning game. People just can't stay up that long. And I think it hurts the product. I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about, games like basketball that's reaching new heights of popularity, NHL's creeping up, and even Major League Soccer in this country is jumping through the roof because hey, it's a 90-minute game. I know I'm done in 2 hours. I'm going home.
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely dead on with that. I think at a certain point, at this point, the baseball purists, as they're known, are starting to kind of fade away a little bit in terms of their relevance on how they impact the game. But and there's certain things like I am against the DH for the whole league. I don't think that is a necessary thing. There are plenty of pitchers that can hit, and you know what? The rest can learn. So it's one of those things. But no, baseball is certainly, and again, the way that they've dealt with the Houston Astros situation, the way they've dealt with the negotiations at the start of this year, people don't like treat places where cheaters are rewarded, and MLB has kind of done that. So that doesn't help you.
Which brings up an interesting point. I'm not sure if I've ever said this on the show or not, but in Little League Baseball, twice there have been scandals. Once with the Bronx team in 2001, where they had a player who's a pitcher that was 2 years older. Jesus Montero, I believe I don't remember. And then also in 2014, there was a team in the Illinois area that drafted from outside of what they were allowed to do. The Bronx team came in second. The Chicago team, Jackie Robinson North, I believe was the name, came in third overall. They stripped them of all of their wins. They took every win away, and they then forfeit everything that they had done because they cheated. Little League Baseball did what Major League Baseball did not. And I find that very telling, but I also find it interesting that nobody talks about that. Nobody discusses the fact that Little League Baseball did that. And it surprised me a little bit with all of this stuff, how that flew under the radar. Now we're a year removed from obviously everything that's happened with Houston, George Springer. Who knows what's going to happen there? I'll be honest with you. I still think that the Astros team is going to compete. I think they're going to have a better record than last year. And I don't ever count that team out to go to the World Series. I think, again, they still have it playing with a chip on their shoulder. They got a lot of anger, a lot of hostility. And I'll be honest, I love Dusty Baker. That is an angel of a human being.
That was the one thing they got right in this whole thing. They brought in the one manager that you couldn't say a bad word about. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. If this was the New York Yankees back in the day, they would have brought in like Ozzie Guillen as their manager to recover the situation. That's what they would have done. But the one smart thing that Houston did was bringing in Dusty Baker.
Smart. Genius.
Yeah. It definitely placates everybody in terms of, well, the guy they got in there is going to be running the right ship. Keep it tight.
And a guy that has come close twice. Lost in Game 7 in 2002, and then lost in 2003 when he was managing the Cubs. That was, of course, the Steve Bartman issue.
Yes.
More than that. But he has had 2 near misses. It'll be ironic to see if he actually ends up getting it with Houston.
The other thing, though, about Dusty Baker, many of the managers, and you get away with cheating in baseball, if you will, the managers of the guys who were using the steroids don't get a bad rap. I mean, Joe Torre is literally in charge of the rules committee right now. But the guys who are on their teams, they even brought La Russa back. And, that was the beginning of it. So and Dusty Baker as well. So it's into the body of the sport. It's not boxing, but there's a certain amount of cheating that the commissioner's office is going to just let slide by.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. No, in terms of, that's why for me, Manfred is the worst commissioner of the Big Five sports right now, because he put the integrity of the game anything but first. Mm-hmm. Like, you can talk about Gary Bettman and how the league is locked out 3 times. That makes him an idiot. That doesn't mean he's taking the integrity of the sport away, right? Roger Goodell, say what you want about him, but at least, he is attempting to reform how the league treats certain issues. He's attempting to. NBA, you have the issues with China, but overall, I think Adam Silver's done a good job. Garber, MLS, I think he falls into the idiot category who got to the top somehow, but at least he's led to expansion in Major League Soccer, a great deal of expansion. But with Manfred, that will be a stain on him until he leaves the position, and probably after.
Absolutely. It's using the line of piece of tin, which of course was won by the Dodgers, and rightfully so. But it's interesting because you mentioned, we got about 15 minutes left at this point. You mentioned the Big Five sports, and it's interesting because the Big Five now includes Major League Soccer. Soccer, which we established at the beginning of the show, is something a shtickle about.
Just a little.
Yeah. So, first of all, congratulations on the new job.
Thank you.
Want to tell us a little bit about that? Talk a little bit about Columbus. Talk a little bit of MLS. I mean, you were brought on for that purpose. Roll with it, sir. It's all yours.
Not that there's any pressure on me at all, but no. So again, I'm the now the league broadcaster for Morris Elite Soccer Club, which is USL League 2. And again, that's your top pre-professional league in North America. So really exciting for that. And you want to talk about expansion. I'll get back to that after Columbus. USL League 2 is it. I mean, the number of clubs that have popped up at the amateur level, the semi-professional level in both the United States and Canada is huge. But talking about MLS, first of all, huge credit to them for what they were able to accomplish. If you had told me, I was at the home opener for my New York Red Bulls back in March. If I had known then that would be the only game I would see in that stadium this year, I would have lost my voice intentionally to make sure, because I have to make up for everything else. From stopping everything during the shutdown to coming up with the full tournament aspect down in Orlando that they were able to pull off with almost no hiccups right after the first couple of weeks, and then being able to get that third phase, which was regionalized, and then the fourth phase all the way through the playoffs and MLS Cup. They really do deserve the credit for that. As for Columbus, I could not be happier for them because this is one of the great stories in American sports. This is a team that literally was on the brink of disappearing. You go back to 2014 when their owner, Anthony Precourt, says, I am moving the team. I've purchased the team and I'm moving it to Austin, Texas. And that entire community, I've been to that stadium where the crowds were not huge. It was not a sellout. They didn't really appreciate the team. All of a sudden, that team was moving. And the entire community rallied around that team. They marched on Town Hall. They marched on City Hall in Columbus. Got Precourt to sell it to new ownership and get his own team in Austin. And now, 6 years later, they've gone from that scene and potentially losing their club to the pinnacle of their first MLS Cup since 2008. I think that's something you don't see in American sports. Like, imagine if the Baltimore Colts had somehow stopped the tractor trailers, turned around, and won the Super Bowl 4 years later. Like, that's what we're talking about here. That's how close it was. So for Columbus to pull that off, all credit to them. All credit to them for what they've been able to do. And to do it against a team like Seattle, who is as close to a dynasty as you can get in soccer in this country, that makes it even sweeter. Just a great game to watch, too. The goals in that game were phenomenal.
And what's nice about it is that what COVID notwithstanding, you look at the ratings on, the MLS, you look at the ratings, even the attendance, you see it increase over the years where it used to be, honestly, like you said, you call it top 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it might not even been at that level. Olympics probably would have been higher, rugby possibly even, who knows? But it's nice to see this sport airing on Fox, airing on, it's, I think in this case, one of the problems that we have in the US is that we don't usually get fired up about sports as a country we didn't invent. The big 3 sports, football, basketball, baseball, invented here. Then you have worldwide sports like hockey, soccer, the Olympics, huge in the rest of the world. And you go there. And David, you and I talked about this at the beginning of the year because you and I were supposed to go to Europe, for different reasons. You and your father, I think, were going to go to Ireland. Me and my wife were going to go to England, and then COVID killed that. Yeah. But you see a different environment where, the sports are different. The excitement is different. Soccer has taken hold in a lot of ways here and become such a more popular sport that, yes, I do think it could very well overtake hockey. And that hurts me. As a Devils fan for as long as I've been, it hurts me to see, hockey fall to number 5. But I could easily see in the next 10 years, soccer moving to number 3. I think it could overtake baseball. Absolutely, it could. And you talk about, games that we didn't invent. It's a very similar situation if you go to Ireland or if you look at Australia. Soccer was very much viewed for a long time as the migrants' game. It was the immigrants' game. They brought it from Europe to here. You have other sports that were made in that country that are tops. Either it's Aussie rules football, or in Ireland you're looking at hurling or Gaelic football. And it's the same thing here. Up until the 94 World Cup, you couldn't get a professional league started in this country, but the amateur game dates back to the 1900s. Some clubs around New York City, the Brooklyn Italians, New York Hungarians, all these, clubs that are representing their neighborhoods in the city. They've been around since 1901, 1905, but it's always been amateur. Getting the World Cup here in 94 just kicked everything off. And now that, you've got a World Cup coming in 2026, which I cannot wait for. I don't care who I see play. I could see Senegal versus Croatia for all I care. I just need to be at one of those games. One game.
Just one. And if it happens to be Scotland or the United States, I will lose my mind. But in the last 15 years, the number of professional soccer clubs in this country has tripled. It was around 35, 36, 10, 15 years ago. In all, you have now 3 levels: MLS, USL League One, and NISA, 4 different professional leagues that have 90 plus teams. You have a soccer specific stadium for 12,000 people being built in Louisville, Kentucky. Tell me who in their right mind had Louisville or Cincinnati or Atlanta or Nashville being a soccer hotbed? Yet Nashville's getting a 40,000 seater. Atlanta United is getting higher attendance than the Atlanta Falcons. Who had that on their radar? This sport is set to explode, and this is the generation of players you're seeing now for the national team. Your Christian Pulisic, your Giovanni Reynas, who is at Dortmund, all these young kids, they've grown up. This is the first generation that's had their entire life with a professional league. They've grown up with hey, I can go professionally in soccer.
So,
I can do this.
Let me ask you a question on that with the younger kids. So my kids, not sports kids at all, big time gamers. And their friends, mostly gamers, not sports kids. And the one sports game they play is FIFA.
Yeah.
And I just don't know how much of that is just like, oh, if they're playing it, then the sports kids who aren't into gaming are playing FIFA. And, if that's overlaying and going, this is the sport I want to be playing. Forget getting beat up in the football game or getting smacked in a hockey game. Slide tackle me instead. I mean, so I'm asking you for your perspective on that.
I think, especially in this country, soccer is much more of a set for, and I don't want to make this political, but it is more liberal leaning. In this country, especially. You go to Europe and you have your left-wing clubs and your right-wing clubs. People say, oh, keep politics out of sports. You go to Europe and discover, oh, wait, it's been like that for 60, 70 years. But I think in terms of that, and it's something where it's a much more open game. With football, there's, you have to be this macho, built kind of a thing. You see it in the crowds. Baseball, it's much more the older set, much more of a conservative fan base. Soccer's kind of that catch-all where you are, as long as you are respectful of others, we don't care. We're rooting for the same team for 90 minutes for the same colors. I'm just with my personal group that I tailgate with. We had guys who, voted for Bernie. We have guys who voted for Hillary, guys who voted for Trump, but we respect each other. And we're here for the same thing. And you don't get that anywhere else. Hell, if you're wearing the wrong jersey at the wrong time, you get beaten up in an NFL game, especially in Philadelphia, because it's Philadelphia. But it's one of the things where it's a global influence. I mean, you saw what happened recently with the death of Diego Maradona. Some parts of the world, Naples, Italy, and Argentina. Argentina declared 3 days of mourning. Name me another sport where you can have a figure. I can think of maybe, when Wayne Gretzky passes in Canada, I can see that happening there. When, a guy you can't think really though of a sports figure in America though that does that. And it's just a global influence where, these guys like Ronaldo and Messi are not just icons in their sport, they're icons in, the fashion pages, in the world of, social media and all these different things. It's just different. It's just really, really different. And I think like I said, I think there's a catch-all of I can be accepted somewhere. And the old saying is that you don't choose the club chooses you. You will find what club is yours. And the fact that these professional teams are popping up in places like Madison, Wisconsin, Des Moines, Iowa is looking at a team. There's a new professional team looking at Portland, Maine coming into the next couple of years. People are going to their teams are going to find them. And the more it continues to grow at the professional level, it's just going to explode. And I'm absolutely on board for it.
Nice. You're getting it at the ground floor.
Oh, yeah, very much the ground floor. I mean, these are guys are going to be saying, oh, yeah, that guy that's starting for the Red Bulls? Yeah, I saw him for 2 years. Don't worry about it.
Well, it was interesting because the game of the weekend drew just over 1 million for Fox, which is solid, which is really solid on that. But you talk about these sort of leagues where, you're working your way up, and we've got about 5 minutes left at this point, but you see the ground floor aspect of it. I mean, I know you also did, I think 5 years, you did about 5 years ago, you were PA announcer for the Can-Am League, right?
Yeah, so Can-Am League, yeah.
You knew Luthner.
Yep.
Okay. I went to school with him back in 1994, which go figure.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, you see these places where, people get their second shot, they can build up, they can get the resume, they can get the experience and then go on to bigger and better. And that's what you've got there. You've got that. I don't want to say, it's going to sound wrong saying it, but almost like that minor league feel to it. Where
no, absolutely. It 100% does. The best thing I could say to akin to for someone who's a sports fan, it's the Cape Cod League. Is basically what USL League 2. You're talking about the top prospects for soccer nationwide are going to be in this league. I mean, you've got guys that have played for the national team coming out of this league. Tim Ream, for an example, who plays for Fulham. Brad Guzan came out of this league. So there are big quality names that come out of this league. So that's basically it's a combination of Can-Am plus Cape Cod League. Basically, is what you're seeing here.
Nice, and they get paid too. Right?
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
I'm asking that because we had the spring league in football just recently.
Mm-hmm.
The spring league was interesting because they did broadcast on FS1, but the players A did not get paid for it, and B they had to pay $2,100 to play in said league. So I'm asking about this because as stupid as a question it is, I just came across that recently, and it's disheartening. I think is the first word I would go. It comes to mind in that particular case. So it's nice to see something like this where they can make a salary, they can survive, they don't have to worry financially. They can make a living, and then still continue to build and grow and try and accomplish the next step, while all the while playing in front of a large audience, playing in front of a TV audience too, and it's pretty much hits pretty much every checkbox that you could ask for, at that level. So yeah, it's hugely cool. I'm very proud of you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in terms of that too, it does vary because the NCAA is still part of the plan here. Because some of these guys are still juniors in college, so they are ineligible for doing that. But for our club, for example, we have one player who's coming in who is in his early 30s, but played internationally, represented Haiti at the international level, who's going to be joining our team. He's going to be making a little bit. It's you're not going to make the big bucks here. You know what I mean? But it's something where if you're eligible to, and we've got players from college that aren't going to be, but they're going to be making a paycheck soon. I can tell you that because we have a couple players. We have players from Rutgers, Monmouth, Seton Hall that, trust me, they're going to be making paychecks somewhere playing this professionally. That's where the NCAA complicates things, but don't they always? So it's
great though.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we're sitting, but it's a tremendous opportunity for myself. It's a tremendous opportunity for these players too, to be the launching pad, to really just kind of explode onto the next level and move on to bigger and better things. But again, the opportunities in this country over the next 10, 15 years, I'm telling you, it's limitless, absolutely limitless for soccer in this country.
Nice. It's a lot to be excited about that too.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we got about 2, maybe 3 minutes left at this point. How can people get in touch with you?
So biggest thing that you can do is follow at Morse Elite SC on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Follow myself at David_Hashagen as well on Twitter. HASHAGEN. Nobody can spell it anyway, so I don't want you guessing. So just follow me on there, and the adventure continues. Once we get to May 2021 is when the season will kick off, and hopefully we're hopeful we can have fans in the stands, even if they are socially distant. Still at that point, but a lot to look forward to and a lot of exciting times ahead for sure.
Nice. And 6 months from now, a lot can happen between now and then. And I mean that in a positive way, not a negative way. But, Obi, as always, a pleasure, man. I'm glad to have you back on.
Good to be here.
So any social media outlets you want to give out, or?
I got to work on memorizing them, but no, not yet. But I just want to say to this, Scott, next time we get on, I want to talk an obscure sport. Let's talk road cycling.
Okay. You know what? Here's what I'm thinking. And this is literally coming to mind right now. There is apparently a documentary on Netflix that's narrated by Rainn Wilson, Dwight Schrute from The Office. And all it is just nothing but obscure sports. Cheese rolling, that Afghanistan sport where you take like a dead animal carcass and have to throw it into a circle. I'm thinking we should probably do a show dedicated to just these weird sports that nobody ever heard of, nobody's ever seen. And you know what? I am down for that.
Hey,
I did my homework on that.
You know what? I might jump on that too. We can talk hurling. Talk Irish. Go into some highlight, perhaps.
Highlight. If you want to do a little like hurling, like you said there, the sport Irish. Yeah, absolutely. I'm down for that. I'll get in touch with you. Let me figure this out. So yeah, maybe I'm thinking 2 weeks after the 29th. Yeah, 29th, right before New Year's.
Sounds good to me.
Cool.
All right.
All right, folks. Thank you as always for tuning in. I do appreciate it. This show can be heard on 122 different podcast platforms throughout the U.S., Canada, Europe, and pretty much everywhere. It's really awesome. Again, this is also available on ZingoTV, on the YouTube channel for Barn Burner Radio Network. My name is Scott Schertzen. Thanks as always for tuning in. And on behalf of Mr. David Hashagen and Mr. Obi Schottenfeld, thanks as always. Stay awesome.